proud contributor here at MarketStream.live. Let's check out the overnight action in the world markets. They were somewhat subdued overnight after an earnings flurry again, digesting all of this. Let's jump right in and take a look at the Asian markets. Let's see, we have the Japanese Nikkei right now, and I'm actually bringing this up. They shed about 0.3%, with about 7 sectors registering losses. Taking a look at the different sectors, I'm looking at the names right now. The technology sector led the way to the downside, down about 0.6%. We're also seeing healthcare down about 0.6%, materials 0.3%, as well as energies. But we also, I'm looking at energies right now. Those were the laggards. Energies actually finished up 0.8%, and we had financials. They're up about 0.3%. They all outperformed. Now, when I talk about all these different sectors and names that I'm about to bring up, like Canon, Mitsubishi, Fujifilm, Tokyo Electron, that basically finished the day basically between up 1.3% to 3%, or how Fujitsu bucked the trend by spiking about 7.8% after revealing that they were having merger talks with Lavino. What does that mean for you? Well, here, trading in the United States and not being able to trade the global equities I talk about, I'll start mentioning also what's going on with the global ETFs. In other words, there are ETF products, exchange-traded products, specifically for Japan. You can take a look at EWJ, ticker symbol EWJ. That's the iShares All World Japanese ETF. And when you take a look at that product, not only is it a liquid underlying, it also has an options market. That's important to me. And when I take a look at the options market right now, for the rest of this week, they actually have weeklies for this underlying. They're pricing in the potential for that underlying that tracks the very stocks, those stocks that I've talked about in the past and in today, are represented in this ETF, the actual foreign stocks. So it's not an ADR or anything that's traded here in the States. These are the actual foreign stocks. It's pricing in that this ETF for the remainder of this week, today and tomorrow, could potentially move either plus or minus, up or down around 12 cents. So not a lot of volatility there. As I've been mentioning, the Nikkei hasn't been moving in a big range, up or down a few percent, below 1%. So we can see that the ETF is pricing in not a ton of volatility. And I'll expand on that as we go through over the mornings as we go over the foreign markets. Taking a look at the Hong Kong Hang Seng, that fell about 0.8%. Now, if you want to keep track here in the United States during the market hours on the Hang Seng, you can, and also trade the very stocks, again, that I'm talking about, whether it's Bell International or PetroChina or Conoco. You can look at EWH. That's the ticker symbol for the ETF that tracks a lot of these major stocks that I talk about in Hong Kong. Now, this ETF is pricing in the potential to move either plus or minus, up or down, around 80 cents. EWH is the ticker symbol. The names I just mentioned, Bell International, Conoco, PetroChina, as well as China Petrol and Chemical, they've all moved overnight between 1.4% and 2.9%. So we're seeing a little bit of more pickup or volatility in those sectors. But again, take a look at EWH today, and you can start looking at potentially positioning in Hong Kong. Taking a look at China's Shanghai complex and composite, slipped down about 0.1%. Not a ton of movement. If you want to start looking at China and trading Chinese names, Asher is ASHR is the ticker symbol for the ETF that will track the Shanghai's top 300 securities. Right now, that ETF is pricing in potential movement going into the end of this week of around plus or minus 32 cents. So when I start talking about like Shangshongzhong investment or AVIC Aviation, which all have moved somewhere between 2.6% and 3.4%, when you hear that these stocks are on the move, you could start looking at ASHR, Asher, that ETF, which trades during our market hours and is optionable. You can start utilizing positioning in there. And now you're truly building a diversified portfolio. Taking a look over at Europe, Europe basically holding up right around break even, maybe a little bit lower. If I'm looking at the German DAX, down about 0.1%. You're seeing heavyweights like Lufthansa, Siemens, Volkswagen, all down between 0.4%, and I'm looking at Volkswagen down 2.4% in the German markets. You also have insurance giant Allianz down about 0.2%. Commerzbank, it's trading flat. That's positive for the bank, especially with Deutsche Bank. They had earnings last night. Actually, stock is holding up very well as post earnings, up about 0.4% right now as I'm watching it go across the ticker. If you want to start looking at Germany and you want to start trading it and positioning it in your portfolio, look at the ticker symbol EWG here in the United States. It's an ETF that carries these exact stocks in its composition. And right now, this ETF EWG, which tracks the German stocks that I'm talking about and more, pricing in this week the potential to move for the remainder of the week of about plus or minus 24 cents. So again, not a ton of volatility. Now taking a look at the UK, the FTSE's down about 0.1%, with home builders continue to be under pressure. We had some positive news out on that front a couple days ago as far as new mortgage applications, but the GDP is really what caught people a little bit off guard. Showed about a 1.4% decline in construction, and that has now put those home builder names on notice. Financials, they're a good showing right now. We see that Barclays, Lloyd's, RBS, RSA Insurance, all up between 0.4% and 2.2% respectively. France, the CAC, right now is down about 0.2%. If you want to start looking at getting exposure into France and you want to trade during our market hours in the names that I talk about, which is either Airbus or Michelin, which are both down basically between 0.9% and 1.9%. Or if all of a sudden you hear that I say that there's some upside movement in Technip, which climbed 4.2%, you could start looking at the ETF EWQ. That's the All France ETF. It is optionable. It's pricing in movement into November. It does not have weekly options, but the options marketplace is telling me they're expecting this stock to be in a plus or minus range, either up or down, around 97 cents for the next basically 4 weeks. Now that will change once the environment changes, and we'll keep on top of that. So that's why you're going to keep on top of the overnight action. The final two countries that I want to take a look at are Italy, and I haven't mentioned it in the past, but I want to now. The MIB is higher by about 0.4%, with STM Microelectronics surging about 9.5%. They beat their earnings estimates. Also, Fiat Chrysler, Banco Popular, and UniCredit are all up between 1.1% and 2.9%. As I look at the tickers going by right now, Italy is still open. EWI is the ETF here in the States. When the market's open, you're going to check this out. EWI is the ETF that tracks these Italian stocks. As a matter of fact, all of the stocks that I mentioned this morning are represented in this ETF, and they do trade the foreign stocks. So on their exchanges and so it's on their in their currency. That's important because when you hear me talk about a stock being up 1 or 2% or down 0.5%, that impacts that ETF directly. And right now you could see that this ETF, EWI, which tracks Italy, is pricing in for the next month the stock be moving in a range of between plus or minus 57 cents. So keep an eye on here, and we'll update that on a daily basis. Finally, Spain. Spain's basically about flat this morning, but I wanted to point out EWP is the ETF that you can track the Spanish markets. As a matter of fact, I have been mentioning some of the banks and financials. One specific bank, Banco Santander, which I had mentioned was to the upside a couple days ago, that makes up about 14% of this ETF. So when you hear me mention that in the overnight action report, this ETF could be on the move, and this is now how you can actually go in and play the news that you're actually hearing from me during our market hours through EWP. By the way, EWP is pricing in over the next month until November expiration, which is roughly around the next 4 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks. A plus or minus move, either up or down move or range between about $1.11. All right, folks, that's it for the overnight action. Went a little longer today, I know, but I wanted to throw this out. So now you have some context about what we talk about in the overnight action, and now you could add it to your portfolio here when you're looking at the markets here in the United States. All right, folks, I'm going to be doing the opening bell in about 45 minutes, so look forward to seeing you there. This is Joe Cusick from the Cusick Group, where I do securities through Money Block, and a proud contributor here at MarketStream.live. We'll see you in about 45 minutes. Take care and have a great trading day.